as everything starts turning on, welcome to Bridges Live. As everything starts being connected, you also can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Periscope, Facebook, and you can also rewatch the show on my YouTube channel and rehear the show on all the wherever you get a podcast show. Bridges Live, you be the judge. And my esteemed colleague, Marylin, Pierre, attorney at law. Welcome, Marylin. Another Wednesday's come, and we are in inaugural day. It is. We have very little, so much to talk about. But today, tell me about your thoughts on today.
Well, I was, I guess, privileged enough to be able to watch part of the inauguration, and I just loved it. And oh my gosh, the set was so beautiful. And it was also kind of sad in the sense that when they did the street views, you see how empty the streets are. It felt like an abandoned city. It didn't feel as vibrant as DC usually is. But let's talk about the beauty. Yeah, it was just so beautiful the way that they arranged everything, the flags waving. I just love, the red, white, and blue combination.
I do,
And yeah.
and I love being in the military. You were in the military.
Mhm.
I was feeling sad for soldiers standing at parade rest for all that long time.
Oh, that long.
You're
What back memories,
right.
traumatic memories. Wondering, oh my gosh, am I going to sneeze? Oh, I hope I don't sneeze because if I break formation, I don't know, what the captain's going to do or the drill sergeant, and then I don't know what the rest of the soldiers are going to do in the sense that you made us have to do 50 push-ups
Right.
just because you had to sneeze.
So and watching it, everyone was shifting their weight, going from left
Mhm.
to right, and trying to do it so subtly. All our military people out there,
Uh,
we feel your pain and we understand
yes,
what's going
yes,
on.
we do. And I have to say too, I was looking at the heels that Jill Biden and Kamala Harris were wearing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is it that we as women have to do to get rid of these torture devices?
But you know what?
Yeah.
Me agreeing does nothing for you.
Hmm. Hmm.
You
Yeah.
women have to say more, do more, and wear less. I
Yes,
mean,
we
less
we do.
heels,
We
less
do. We
heels.
do. Yeah. I mean, we really do because I keep thinking how these things came about and why it is that they are considered an essential part of our, well, part of the things that we wear for certain occasions. The discomfort of having to stand and walk with these stilts on, it's just so unbelievable. I felt so bad, especially when they were in the rotunda.
Yes.
I was looking at the slick floors. I am not the most elegant person when it comes to that. I mean,
You're
some
thinking you're
people could
falling.
walk
You're thinking
that,
you're
and
falling.
yeah, so I did notice that, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we have to come up with something. And I was also looking at the beautiful outfits that they had on, and that was absolutely terrific. They looked gorgeous. But we go back again to the military part because I always wonder why it is that women don't have a uniform the way men do. You notice the men
I
had the
do.
dark suits on, they had, a shirt,
There's a standard.
usually white,
Yeah.
and they had a tie on. And that's their uniform. They're sticking to it. I love it. I'm not saying we need to adapt that one, but if we could adapt something like that, I know Madison Avenue is probably trying to censor me right now
Oh yeah.
because
They
they
have
can feel
all.
the money being sucked out of their pockets. But yeah, I think that we could accomplish so much more if we didn't have to think, okay, what am I going to wear today? Did I wear it yesterday? Did I wear it the last time I attended that event with those people? Yeah, it just takes up much more brain space than it needs to.
Well, Albert Einstein wore the same suit, and he did that for that particular reason, was to remove all the useless thinking. He did some other things too. Actually, he became celibate in his last 20 plus years of his life also, so he can put more of his energy into his brain work. There's, since we are on You Be the Judge, and You Be the Judge, as people don't know, as they're listening, is that it's a format that we go over some legal issues. We talk about some things that can help you, always things that can help you. So it's always about, Bridges Live is always about giving you information, understanding, and helping you put into an action. My favorite attorney in the world is here, and I got a question for you. There's two, but we were talking a lot today about constitutional law, because the Constitution is the one mainstay about what people say they're fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your take on how the founding fathers came to the Constitution? Because I think it's still a remarkable document. I just think it's because how they left it so open to be added to, and not so cornered off where it died. So what do you think about the Constitution itself and how it was written?
Well, I think it is an excellent read. And I love the way it's written because it's considered a living, breathing document,
Yes.
and how certain parts of it were interpreted differently based on where our country was back then. But I want to point out that a lot of people say that this is a democracy. We do not have a democracy. We have a republic.
Correct.
And it was more evident 4 years ago when Hillary Clinton got the most votes, but she lost the election. This year, well, I should say, well, in November's election, it was not as evident because, well, for those who who think that the voting process went as it should have, you had Biden, who received the most votes and the most electoral college votes.
Mhm.
So therefore, we did not see that republic playing out the same way that we saw last year. So today,
Can you explain the two so people understand the difference?
well, democracy is the person who gets the highest number of vote wins. That's it. If there are three people voting, you get two, the other person gets one, you win. And a republic, it's not necessarily the person who gets the highest number of votes that win. It's the person, well, votes of the people. It's the person who gets the highest number of the votes that are counted. Yeah, and that's what the Electoral College is for. And that's why there was all that discussion around, um, was it November, late November, December, January even, as to, whether or not certain Electoral College votes should count, whether whether people had freedom to change and vote based on
And
certain criteria rather than the number of people who actually voted.
and the argument over the electoral committee allowing XY votes, what got in, what didn't get in. That is also the argument. How, because there is an oversee of the voting process, and who verifies when a vote is legitimate and not legitimate. And
Exactly.
that was where President Trump's argument was that a lot of votes for him was not allowed in because of whatever reason. It was not certified.
Yes, because he was saying
Uh-oh.
certain people, should not have voted. Well, he had a whole.
You froze again, Marylin. You're freezing up a bit. While Maryland's trying to unfreeze herself, I think what we were talking about is how the Electoral College and how we live in a republic. And in a republic, and this is what Plato talks about all the time, is that being in the republic is that you have a obligation to be active if you're part of the republic. If you are a non-active part in the republic, then it leads to other forces to take over. And I think that's where a lot of us who work in civil engagement and people engagement is that we don't get enough people to participate, to be an active republic. They think that just because we're in a democracy that everything is supposed to be applicable and is supposed to be allowed. No, you can only be allowed if you are part of the republic. And being part of the republic means an active participant. And your active role is to be informed, is to vote on all things, elections, small, and to be vocal when things are in your community. Your community is small, large, and national, right? So these things are important, and that's what takes part in republic. So if you read your literatures and you read your historical thing, most of the time that when we fall prey to oppositions, it's because we have not fully been engaged. And then if we are engaged, we're not fully informed. So with that being said, and we'll wait for Marylin to come back, in today, we had this exchange of leadership, but did we have the exchange of power? When we look at, when I was thinking about being in the, think about being in the military, you may have a new commander come in.
Mm-hmm.
And a new commander may come in the military, where it be your captain, where it be your colonel, where it be your post command. Just because leadership changes doesn't mean that the rules change. A lot of things may subtly change, but to be an active participant, when I was talking about Marylin while you were coming back, is being an active participant in the republic. Just because you think we live in a democratic society, you have to be actively engaged in the republic, and that is our civic duty.
Definitely, definitely. And you're right. Just because the leader changed doesn't mean that the rules change. However, the interpretation of the rules change many times, and the priorities change, and that's why leadership is so important. That is why as a member of the Republic, we should do our best to participate in a system where we have leaders who are representative of what we prioritize and what we think should happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the Constitution. So we were talking about the Constitution before you froze.
Mm-hmm. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened, but
that's okay. Mm-hmm. So you're explaining the Constitution and how it's a living, breathing document, and how those. And I asked you, so what do you think about that document? How the founding fathers wrote it?
I think that they wrote it very aspirationally, which is a very good thing, because because of that, we could expand it, we could interpret it. The example that I like to use is that the 14th Amendment, for instance, was used to interpret separate but equal, being the law of the land in Plessy versus Ferguson. And it was also used in interpreting separate but equal being unconstitutional in Brown versus Board of Education. So between those two interpretations, nothing was changed in the law itself. Not a word, not a dot, not a comma, nothing was changed, but the interpretation was different. So it goes back again to what we were discussing in terms of leadership and the priorities of those leaders and how they interpret things.
Do you think the 14th Amendment, if it was studied by younger people at a good, whatever age, I'm not going to think of a particular age, that then people will understand how separate we were and how hard it takes for us to be collective as a unity? Because I think that argument, the 14th Amendment, is a blatant argument that there was a separate there was a separate system for people.
Yeah, well, some people might argue there still is. I'm looking at the text of Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, which says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. I mean, that is a mouthful, and that covers so much, which is why there's so many books just on that section of the 14th Amendment itself. And the 14th Amendment has given us all these rights. I was listening to the radio today, and they were playing, they were supposed to play a clip, and they ended up playing another clip by Malcolm X. And Malcolm X was at it was at his United Nation. He was being interviewed, I guess, for members of the audience at the United Nations.
Yes.
And Malcolm X talked about that because he said that, you know, when people came from Hungary or Poland, you know, they don't need any new laws to say that they are, well, that they are citizens or, you know, of this state. You know, if they're naturalized here, they become a citizen and therefore they could vote. However, because for African Americans, we need the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah,
You know,
we
100 plus
had
years ago.
we had to prove that we were citizens. We had to prove that we were
Exactly.
humans, right?
That was his point. You know, if you look at the women's suffrage that we just celebrated in August, when you look at that, you said, oh, women have had the right to vote for over 100 years. Well, no, because Black women didn't have the right to vote. Well, Black women really were not able to vote. There's an issue as to whether they had the right and they just could not practice the
Correct.
right. And sometimes you might have a right to do something, but if you can't not exercise that right, it's as if you don't have the right at all. So really, it wasn't until about the 70s that Black women got the right to vote. And that, I think that was Malcolm X's point, because if these Black women were considered citizens, when the Constitution came into effect, they should have had the right to vote. And then when white women got the right to vote, they should have had the right to vote. And even somewhere along the line, when Black men got the right to vote, you know, they should have gotten the right to vote. Yet they didn't actually get the right to vote until the 70s, which is really interesting, because when you listen to the news nowadays, it's like, oh, this election was, you know, what turned out this way because of Black women. This happened because of Black women. That happened because of Black women. So I guess you might say Black women as a whole have been very responsible in using the power that they have had in the voting booth for, you know, the few years that they have had it.
I mean, Shirley Chisholm talked about the Voting Rights Act and how it was unfair. I mean, again, when you go back to the 14th Amendment, if it's all citizens, then why are has only been the African Americans that had to fight to prove you were a citizen, not natural born, not a human being, but a citizen, and that was hard to prove.
That some of the things that we that when you look at history, and being the historian that you are, when you look at the history, you say to yourself, oh my gosh, what were these people thinking?
Right.
And people like Shirley Chisholm, who is a heroine of mine. Oh my gosh, I admired that woman so much. She was really fierce. And the reason why I say that is, nowadays in 2021, some people are too afraid to speak up. So you could just imagine what it was like for her to speak up
Mhm.
way back when, and to be the first woman to run for, a president of the United. I'm sorry, the first woman.
Yeah,
Was she the first woman to run for
just
president of
first.
the United States?
Yes.
Yeah, I think she's got that distinction. And I also loved her tagline, on board and unbossed. So so that shows you how powerful she was. And yeah, like I said, I cannot say enough wonderful things about her.
So,
And,
so
and the idea, just to go back again to the Voting Rights Act, the idea that it has to be renewed, it it
right.
it, it doesn't make any sense, but yet here we are.
But then again, I don't think people know that it has to be renewed. People just
Hmm.
think it's valid all the way through. No, it has to literally be signed in to renew itself.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's something. How many people you think, young or old, even knew that, or even non-black knew that, or
Yeah,
black people knew that?
yeah. And what happens if we get you know, get legislatures and a president who just refuses to renew it? It's like,
Right.
it was a good idea, but it's passed. Does that mean that, if I show up at the voting booth, all of a sudden they're going to be like,
Yeah.
well, we hate to tell you.
You didn't get renewed.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't get renewed. Your time has expired, and maybe you could stand over there and show people which way to come in to vote. Or you could go home and, finish out the rest of your day. Could
Yeah.
you imagine? I mean, I know we're making fun of it, but
No, but
the
but but
idea
but
that
no.
we have a woman who is a heartbeat away from the presidency, who, if we have a president and a legislature who decides to do that, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. And we're not that far away from that,
No.
because I mean, look at the numbers that we have in the legislature. Yeah. So yeah,
So
it's scary. It is.
so now I'm going to go to something very somberish, which
Hmm.
is the streets were empty.
Yes.
We have so many troops here in DC area and around our surrounding areas.
Hmm. Hmm. And we're both former military, and
Yeah,
we love to see, our people all dressed up, the medals are shining,
yeah,
everything. I mean, there's not a speck of dust on the shoes,
that's
and
right.
I mean, all these kinds of things. It's beautiful, but for some people it's traumatic,
Well, that's what I was
because
going to
it's
say.
like an occupied city.
Right. So with that, and I'm going to martial law.
Hmm.
What is some of the laws that you know that gets diminished or uplifted in martial law? Can you explain what martial law is a little bit if you want to look it up? And because you may not have dealt with it, but martial law takes on a whole different affect in our communities.
And we wonder whether we have, well, martial law is basically when the government on an emergency basis takes
Correct.
over and says, hey, because we want to protect the general public, we have to do
Mhm.
this, and this is the least restrictive way of doing it. Basically, we want to protect the masses, therefore we are going to take rights away from the few.
Because the military takes command.
Yes, exactly. And what happens is, the people in DC. I've been talking to people who live in DC or around DC, and they said for the past couple of days, some of them have to walk around with their lease in their hands to show that they actually live where they live, so they could get to their houses.
Correct.
So some metro stops were closed. You couldn't go in and out of certain areas without special passes and permits and papers. It's like, wow. I mean, this is the United States. I wholeheartedly understand the security reasons for that, because all we have to do is look at what today's the January 20th. So 2 weeks ago, January 6th, there was, an attempted something that
Right.
that made all these security requirements necessary.
But most people, like, I got the
Yeah,
same
but
information
still.
because I got the same information too, that I know people who were living in the DC area, they had to prove where they were,
Mhm.
are, and going.
Yes,
And
yes.
and then I heard one incident, somebody was walked to the corner store by a military personnel,
Wow, wow.
because it's a corner store where they get their, trinkets, foods, or whatever.
Mhm,
And they
mhm.
were walking, and they because you can't drive down there now. So they were
No,
walking, and the military personnel walk with them.
yeah. You can't
So
drive, you can't take the metro, so
so
walking, maybe bicycling.
so that was almost considered to be martial law, but it wasn't, because
Mhm.
the military wasn't in control. They were just on stand.
Yes.
I'm
It,
not, people want protection, but I'm not sure if the American people will ever want martial law.
I don't think so either. My mother has actually lived under it in Haiti,
Yeah.
and that actually caused a bit of consternation for her when I joined the military, because she did not like the idea of me joining the military in the United States, because she was thinking it was the same thing as the military in Haiti. And I had to tell her it's not the same thing. So, which I'm glad, because I do think that we need a civilian commander in chief, which is what we have in this country.
Mm-hmm.
You see what could happen. I mean, it's not a perfect system that we have, but how do they say, it's not perfect, but it's the best system out of all the other ones.
I actually think, on a side note, that we're about ready to birth a new system. Not a new system, but it's a revamping. I think it's coming.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah, I think it's been a long time coming. We do need to make some changes, definitely. And I'm really hoping that we don't hear the, oh, change comes slowly. You have to wait your turn, and we can't do this. I think the biggest lesson that I learned from the last administration was that you could make so much change if you want to. So the idea that, oh, we need to take our time, people, need to adjust and come to the same position that you're at before anything could be done. Yeah, that could be thrown out with the bathwater, because
And so my next question is, now, 2 weeks ago, we had whatever we have. I'm not going to call it the things they're calling it, because I
Mhm.
think that just incites more fear and terror, what they're calling it.
Yes.
But there are people going to have federal charges. So on a criminal side, going back into you, my legal friend,
Mhm.
I've been charged with going into the Capitol.
Mhm.
I call you, the Capitol says it depends on the charges, or does it depend that it's a federal charge? Or does a federal charge different than a county charge? I mean, so
Oh, yes.
so explain what's the difference between a federal charge
Mhm.
and a non-federal charge?
Well, the Capitol is considered federal property.
Correct.
Therefore, if you're charged criminally there, or even civilly, in certain situations, then that is a federal crime.
Okay.
Uh, and being that we live in Maryland and we're very close to DC, and we have all these federal properties around, I'll give you an example. For instance, if you're going to NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in Gaithersburg, if you speed in NIST and you get a speeding ticket, that is a federal speeding ticket. But if you just speed outside the gate and you get a speeding ticket, then it is a state speeding ticket. So that's the difference. That has whatever happened in the Capitol is on federal property. Therefore, you would be charged with a federal crime.
So now that I got charged with a federal crime,
Mhm.
and because they see my face, they saw me walking around, what would be the charge that most likely is being handed out or given?
Well, it depends because so much happened. If
Right.
you're inside the building,
Yes. I'm
then you're a
inside the building.
trespasser. Yeah, yeah, there are federal trespassing charges. There and some people would have destruction of property charges. I
But that
think
would
some
have
of
to
the
be
police
proven.
officers were. I'm sorry.
Wouldn't that have to be proven? The destruction
Oh,
part.
oh yes. You were asking about the charges. You weren't asking
Right,
about.
right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm in the building. It's
Mhm,
it's it's a trespass charge.
yes.
What does that entail? Like, what is it? Is it more of a larger fine? Is it just a fine? Is it a fine and jail time? I mean, I guess it depends on the discretion of the federal court.
No. Well, I would say yes and no. Okay. When you charge with something, it
Okay.
actually says what the section that you charge with actually says what the maximum punishment is
Okay.
for that charge, and whether there is a mandatory, whether there's a mandatory punishment for that. Okay. Yeah. So depending on what you charged and what section you charge with, for instance, it will say that you charge with section blah 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 of the U.S. Criminal Code, and therefore your maximum penalty for that is either a fine of X amount and or a period of confinement of X amount. Yeah. So when the charges are written, they're actually written in that way. Yes, you charged with this. This is what the maximum penalty for that is.
Do you think, besides the people that did bodily harm, which that's going to be tough unless they actually have video proof and an ID. Besides those people,
Mhm.
do you think anyone's going to jail?
I actually think that you mean the people who did not, yeah, the people who did not do bodily harm, I don't see them going to jail. I see them maybe getting some sort of, having to pay a fine or something of that sort. But the people who did bodily harm, I do see them going to jail. And I think part of it as well was the trauma that the people in the building were experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way I understand, well, first of all, they had all these cameras there.
Right.
There were a lot of cameras there. Not only, I would imagine, are there a lot of cameras in the building itself? People brought their cameras, their cell phones in, and they were using them. So there were a lot of cameras there, and on top of that, they were then putting that information on social media. Oh, wait. So there was a lot there. I think a lot of it really has. I think it's going to be pursued as much as it possibly could be pursued because they want to make sure that no one does that again.
Okay, I'm getting to my point. I don't think anything of what you said is a real deterrent. But I'm going to go a little bit further than that. Hold on a second. So
Mhm.
I'm in the Capitol. I am being charged with um, what's trespassing.
Mhm.
Can I say that I was called to trespass? Is there any legal argument that you can think of off the top of your head that you can say that I was told to do this and I'm following my president's orders? Is there a way you can make that argument for me as your
Uh,
client?
you can make that argument, but
Is it a good argument?
winning, yeah, but it's not a winning argument. You can't say I committed a crime because somebody told me to.
Well, of course you can.
That was part of the, well, to go back to Nuremberg. I mean, that was part of the Nuremberg trials. You
It
can't say,
was.
I was, especially in a situation like that. I mean, you could say that if you were under duress or something where your life was in danger or the life of someone you love was in danger. If somebody says do this or else, I'm going to hurt your family member. Yeah, you could make that argument, but I don't see that being the argument that could be made in that situation.
So so you don't even see that's a valuable argument of
Not in
saying,
that situation. No,
okay.
no.
So, okay, so now I'm going to go with the person that actually hurt someone.
Hmm.
Is there a way that I am not doing jail time?
I would find that difficult to,
Okay.
yeah, because you have the Capitol Police there, you have, well, you have our country basically. Our country, our leaders, the vice president was in that building at the time. It would be very difficult to say that, oh, I didn't know who was in there, because I mean everybody knew who was in the building and what they were supposed to be doing in there. That's a tough argument to make.
So besides hurting someone
Mhm.
and damaging property, oh, am I going to jail for damaging property?
Yes, because some of the things, that the way I understand, I mean, they were priceless. And then there might also be some violation of national security, because I think a laptop was taken.
Well, that was a laptop. That is
Yeah,
security issue. But
yes.
but besides laptops and
Mhm.
notes and files, so damaging property, if I broke a chair, am I going to jail?
Probably not.
Okay,
Uh,
so if I don't kill someone,
mhm.
take documents, or hurt someone, I'm pretty only getting a trespassing charge and damaging property. Those
Yeah,
are
but
the,
that's not to be made light of either,
no, it's pretty
you
light.
got a criminal record. Oh, no, 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 no. It is a huge thing to get a criminal.
Okay,
I mean, it is unbelievably huge. And this is what I tell young people all the time, because sometimes they don't understand what it means to have a criminal record. And I have to tell them that it's huge to have a criminal record. And maybe I would say most of these people would get a version of probation before judgment, which they won't have a criminal record. I mean, if you have a good enough lawyer, you could, I would say, bargain your way down to probation before judgment,
which
where
is my point. You're
yeah,
making my point,
yeah,
because
yeah, but
most of the
that's,
people there have been, they were white.
yeah,
Most of them probably don't have a criminal record, so they're not really
we
doing
don't
much but a
know.
crime.
I looked at these people and they seemed like they were followers. And so I wouldn't be surprised if more of them have criminal records than we thought, because it seems like they would, to me, somebody who do something like that, more likely than not, has followed uh, people and have been convinced to do things that they shouldn't have been convinced to do before. So,
And I'm not a cynical person, but I don't think these people are going to do any time at all.
yeah, it would
It,
be in a
it,
situation like that. It would be, but I think the idea though of having a criminal record is extremely important, because when you have a criminal record in this country, there's so many things that you don't qualify for. You don't qualify for federal benefits. You don't qualify for federal student loans, for instance. You don't qualify for many jobs, because um, yeah, it's a huge thing. I don't know if I have time to tell you about this young lady uh, who I who told me the story of how her life was changed, because she got a criminal record for stealing something that was being sold for $4.99. So that's nothing to be sneezed at.
I think we have. I want to see. We actually have a. Looks like someone wants to join us. Oh,
Oh,
hold
hi
on.
Kieran, how are you?
Hold, Dr. Shauna. I'll be right with you in a
So,
few minutes. So I'm going to put you back in the waiting room.
okay,
Okay.
I just
Nice
trying to
seeing
test
you.
my video.
Um. So what I was thinking here is that I just don't think that we are. I don't think it's enough deterrent. I just don't think whatever they seem like they're going to do is really putting people off of going, that was a bad idea. What was a bad idea was hurting someone, taking documents, but just breaking in to the Capitol, I don't see how whatever they're going to do, if no one does jail time, and do I think everyone needs to do jail time? I think the jail's overcrowded anyway, but I don't know what you could do with them. Maybe you can remove them. Something needs to happen where it goes, I don't want to do that. And I don't think mischief being recorded as I don't think it's a deterrent.
Yeah, but it's either that or nothing.
Yes.
And if it's nothing, then I would assume that even more people would do it. If it's that, at least some people would say, hey, maybe we shouldn't go ahead and do something like that.
You got to think about the people that are going to do it are thinking about weighing the how heavy is this? Right. This is not like a common person like, oh, we're at dinner, like, let's go break into the Capitol. No, this isn't for common people. But you think about the other groups or the other type of person, this doesn't stop you.
There's certain people, no matter what the punishment is, they're going to do what they're going to do anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm thinking that many in that group probably they're going to do what they're going to do anyway, because there was a sense of entitlement. There was a sense of, this is our house and we could do whatever we want in it. If we want to trash it, we will trash it without it. So those people, I doubt that they're actually going to be deterred by a fine or something of that sort. But then we have to follow the rule of law, and the rule of law says if you do something like that, you need to face the consequences.
Do you think, and I'm going to put you now in the judge's seat real quick before we sign off. If you were a judge, when you become a judge, I'm speaking into existence, when you become a judge and you're sitting on the bench and the person that broke into the Capitol is now in front of you, how are you feeling, you think?
I am not feeling happy about what happened, because, I mean, this person has threatened a whole system of government.
Correct.
And has threatened our duly elected leaders.
Correct.
And has decided to believe in some fairy tale about a stolen election. Yeah. And so all these kinds of things has made it very, very difficult to believe that this person doesn't know what they were doing. But it depends on the person itself. Sometimes you in the middle of a situation and you get carried away with what is happening. We've seen it in crowds where crowds are able to get people to do things, peer pressure and things of that sort, of get people to do things that people don't even recognize themselves afterwards. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. This is totally out of.
And one more last question. I live in Jersey, Florida, everywhere else except for DC. I get charged with a federal crime. Where do I go to court at? Do I come back to DC?
You're coming back to DC.
Okay, so everyone's coming back to DC.
Everybody's coming back to DC because that's where the crime occurred.
Okay, so no matter what,
that in and of itself is a huge issue, because you've got to travel back. And I don't think the people who paid for the buses, because I mean, it's been on the internet that certain people have paid for bus rides. The people who paid for those bus rides are not going to be paying for those people from New Jersey, Florida, Ohio, wherever, to then come in to be tried.
So what circuit court judge is going to handle these cases? Is this going to be many, or do you think there's going to be a revolving?
It's not circuit court, because circuit court is at the state level.
That's right. That's okay.
And so it's the federal
judge.
Court. So yeah, so it's the United States District Court for the District of Columbia.
Wow, there's some stuff coming in the next couple of years with these cases are just going to be highlighted in our area. That here comes another one.
Here comes another one. And I really hope that we have a nice, boring 4 years. I really think that we need the rest. Some people are like, oh, we need some. No, we need a nice, boring 4 years where just we have adults who are leaders who get things done uh, in this representative democracy where they represent us and do the job that we sent them to DC to do.
I actually am going to do a pushback for that, and I don't think we're going to have a boring 4 years. And I actually don't.
No, 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 I'm hoping we will have
No,
a boring 4
and
years.
I'm not hoping for him because I have this sadness when we're talking about the Republic and the
Mhm,
Constitution. I think people fall asleep of being an active participant in the Republic.
mhm.
And I think if it becomes a boring quote, what does boring mean? I get it. 4 years, I think people fall back asleep and we're not pushing forward. And that's what I mean by this birthing of a new era or a
Mhm.
new republic
Yes.
is coming of age, or this republic is growing up, however you
Mhm,
want to put
mhm.
it. I think we need to be more active. I think if we were children and we're going to go into our teenage years in this republic, then let us become pimply and active.
Yes, but they're not mutually exclusive. It could
No.
be boring in the sense that we're getting things done, as opposed to, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning because there's a new tweet, and that's what I mean by, I'm hoping that we've passed the teenage years where we've been tweeting at 3 o'clock in the morning and now could move on where
We have a
we are
driver's
at
license.
work at 8 o'clock in the morning. We're ready to listen to the briefings that are given by the national security advisors
Right.
and actually take their advice. And we could then talk about what laws need to be changed. And, just like we talked about the Voting Rights Act. I
Right.
mean, if we have it so that in 4 more years, we don't have to deal with whether or not the Voting Rights Act needs to be renewed because everybody, just like the 14th Amendment says, everybody who is born or naturalized in this country then becomes United States citizens. And we don't, a United States citizen, we don't need an extra law that says, oh, yes, but this is what gives you the right to vote. So,
I want to say thank you, everyone, for listening to You Be the Judge. We talk about legal stuff and legal issues. If you have any questions for Marylin, please contact her, inbox us here at You Be the Judge or Bridges Live here, or contact Marylin Pierre, attorney at law, if you have any questions here about your legal issues and your legal questions. Please, we like to be here to be informative, informational, and then for you to take an action. And so if you have anything that's coming up in your life, you just unsure about, again, don't take this as legal advice, because you still need to go talk to your attorney for your specific information. And that's very important. We like to talk over and have a view over on different things. Just like today, when we're talking about the people who are attacking the Capitol, I'm putting myself in there and thinking about, what could happen, what's going to happen, just the possibilities. So, Marylin, anything before we take off and see you next Wednesday?
well, I am just so thrilled about what's been going on. Everything went smoothly. Everyone is safe. So yes, we have a a new administration. I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to offer,
Mhm.
holding their feet to the fire, because I really think that we need that. I was concerned about one line of President Biden's
Speech.
speech where he says, I'm going to
Thank
be
you.
just as accountable to the people who didn't vote for me as the people who voted for me. I'm
Yeah.
paraphrasing, but yeah, I don't know. I thought that was kind of insulting to all these people who worked so hard to get him to where he is at. I was really happy to see the three new members of Congress I'm sorry, the three new members of the Senate get sworn in. And it's just a beautiful, lovely thing. I hope we live in this la la land for the next century.
It's as long as we know this, Joe Biden is not the great white hope.
No.
Okay. We got it. He has an agenda. He's been a
Mhm.
politician his whole life. since what, 73? My goodness, right? He's got people he has to adhere to. He's got pockets, I'm sure, because he's a politician. 50 years as a politician. He could be a nice guy, he could be a very smart man. But at the end of the day, he's a politician. And us as the Republic still must be active.
Yes, totally. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dyer. It was such a pleasure. I'll see you next week.
See you next week. Goodbye, everyone. And you guys have a great evening.